All right, there we go. Niels, thank you for joining.
Yeah,
Thanks for preparing your presentation. We already went through it on the short notice before this session. So in today's advanced workshop, we're going to be discussing server-side tagging. So most of us have been enjoying server-side tagging for the past few months already, because a lot of us found the necessity to set it up because of consent mode related stuff and cookie depletion and whatnot. So in today's session, you're going to tell us some more about what SST can bring us, what developments are going on currently. You're going to be revealing some nice new features inside of TAGGRS as well, like the template gallery you mentioned earlier. So please take the floor. The floor is yours. If any of you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. In the last few minutes, I think 15 or 30 minutes, we have room for an additional Q&A. So if you've got questions, feel free to drop them and we can address them at the end of the presentation. So Niels, feel free to share your screen and let's get it from there.
yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to meet you all. I'll start sharing my screen first and share my presentation. Sorry, this one. Hopefully you can see this all. That makes it easier for me. Perfect. So TAGGRS. I'll first start with a small introduction of myself. I come from online marketing background. I founded an online marketing agency already 5 years ago. So we were doing a lot of Google ads and social media. And around 2 years ago, we noticed a little bit of a drop in the data, in the conversion data. That was really the time that we started thinking about what we could do to minimize it and what the future would hold for data tracking. And during that investigation, we found that server-side tagging was the solution that has a lot of benefits on that part. And we found that Google Cloud was the only option back then, which was really high prices, low support, technical setup. So it was not accessible for most marketeers or developers. So that really got us thinking about if we could do it ourselves. And basically from there it started the development, and we've been developing for about a year and launched it a year ago, a bit more than a year ago, and that really took off. And so my role in the company is to manage it as best as we can. We have big goals. We try to grow international. Started of course in the Netherlands, but at this point we're already all across the world, and we try to expand it even more. We're really focused on the marketeer. Basically, server-side tracking is another complexity in a tracking setup, which we found that most marketeers are doing. So marketeers set up the tracking themselves and try to optimize for the campaigns, of course. But when tracking becomes more complex, it's getting harder to set up. Our main goal is to make it accessible for marketeers as well, and not only for developers. So we keep that in mind constantly when we develop new features. Small history. As I said, 2 years ago, we had the first idea to develop this. The main important thing for us was to have a system that's not tied to Google on on the server side part. So we run our own servers and our own architecture, and we're not dependent on Google for that part. So yeah, we are completely independent company, and we're one of the few in the world who have done it this way. So that's why it took a lot of time to figure out the structure of that and to build it. But yeah, we've been building since that time, and yeah, currently we have a few thousand companies that are running on TAGGRS. So it's really, in a year, it really took off, and we're growing really fast every month still. So we're curious to see where that will lead us. But for now, it's really an adventure on that side. Yeah, and so I got into contact with Bob and Miles. I think it's about half a year ago, and we discussed about the tracking and about the challenges that marketeers face, and how server side could help in that regard. So yeah, we've been building ever since together. And today I just want to share you some updates about TAGGRS, but also the challenges that you face as marketeers, and yeah, with regards to what's happening in the world of tracking and privacy. So just to start off, basically the thing that lies behind all the development is the end of the third party, mostly cookies, but also tracking. Yeah, that's why over the past year you've probably seen less data in your accounts, in your GA4 or in your Google Ads conversions. Yeah, that's due to a number of factors, including ad blockers and browser blocking, and now recent also the consent mode, of course. That's actually blocking the data, but there's also the part that cookies get limited or blocked as well. So in that way, conversions cannot be tied to the campaigns where the conversions belong. So on the conversion side, it's actually double the negative effect of tracking blocking, because you have less data and less cookie connection between the campaigns and the conversions on the website. Also, yeah, another major part of why companies move away from third-party tracking is that the data is collected by American servers, and for the EU at least, it was a big issue. They have now an agreement, so it's not the most essential issue at this point, but it's still open for discussion, and yeah, there's still a lot of debate on whether that should be or not. But it's a fact of why you see most big corporates move away from this type of tracking. And also, if you have a lot of tracking going on in the client, in the regular web container, it could also slow your website down. The real effect of this is, of course, it differs per website. The bigger websites with a lot of tracking have more effect on the page speed than the smaller website with less tracking. But yeah, all the scripts have to be loaded into the browser, and that takes a bit of loading time, which could be avoided. So as I said, you have less data, less conversions, and the fact of the question is, where does that come from? There are three major blockers in that sense. The first one are ad blockers. The effect of ad blocking is also per country, per website, it's different. But yeah, you see around 2 to 10% ad blocking going on websites. So that has an impact on the amount of data that's being tracked. Next to that, we have browser blocking. Works in a similar way. Browser blocking is mostly through Safari. Safari is the main browser that blocks most traffic, but also Edge, Firefox, for example, are also blocking tracking, and Google Chrome is now starting to phase out at least the cookies, the third-party cookies, which is of course is delayed now, but yeah, the course is that they will eventually block all third-party tracking cookies. So that's a tracking blocker. And last one, and you've probably been experiencing that for the last few months, is the consent mode. Of course, the promise of consent mode is that the modeling takes place, but yeah, the threshold for that's still really high. So for most smaller companies, it really has a high impact on measurability, if not a lot of people accept the cookies. So when we look at browser and ad blocking, this is what's currently happening if you do not do server-side tracking. So basically, you have a web container in Google Tag Manager, and you place your scripts in there. So it could be GA4, Facebook, Google Ads, all the scripts that you or the software that you track. So when something is happening on the website, especially with e-commerce, it's sent either to the data layer or to the script that you install. It sends the data to Google Tag Manager, and the scripts are being placed in the browser, and yeah, that can be blocked. So yeah, when browser blocking, for example, when Safari does not want the data to be sent through, they can block the request, and yeah, the data won't arrive in Google Analytics. Also, the cookies that are being set from these software, the duration of that can be limited. This is what we, for example, have seen in for Facebook, that they yeah, shorten the cookie duration, which makes it harder to track the conversion. If we look at server-side tracking, the first part is still the same. So you have a website, and the events are happening on the website. The events were being sent to the web container. Now, where you normally would send the events to GA4 or Facebook, now with server-side tracking, you send it to the server environment first. So this is a second container in Google Tag Manager, the server container. And with TAGGRS, the server container in Google Tag Manager is connected to our servers. And that's why you can manage it all in Google Tag Manager, but in the background, the data flows through our servers and our system. You can host TAGGRS on your own domain. So that's why you can set first-party cookies from your own subdomain. Because TAGGRS, the data moves through there. All the cookies that you set are from that subdomain, and that's why the regulations on third-party cookies do not account for with server-side tagging, because they're considered as first-party cookies. So that's a great way to run first-party cookies, especially for social media channels, which really still heavily rely on third-party cookies. For example, Google Analytics is running on first-party cookies, so it's better Google has it better organized already. But yeah, there are still, I think 80% of the platforms are still relying on third-party cookies, and server-side tracking is a way to yeah, not be reliant on the third-party cookies. So when you have the server container and you place the scripts in there, it will send it from server to server, and that cannot be blocked by ad blockers and browser blocking. So that's why there's an uplift in data. Another advantage is that you can also, with the server container, it's an open environment, so you can send additional data to it as well. We see this, for example, by companies that use CRM data from their CRM systems to send to the server container, but it could also be, for example, profit tracking, where you have a database of the profit margins of your website, of your products on the website, and you send the profit margins to the server container, and yeah, with that you can do profit tracking in different systems. So these are cases that can be used for that. Benefit is, of course, that when you're a bit more technical, you can do these kind of things as CRM tracking, profit tracking, with no additional costs. So it's just being really handy with the data, but it's a bit more advanced to set up. So we discussed ad blocking and browser blocking, and how server side handles that. But yeah, now we see also the consent mode moving in, which went really fast. In 3 months, we all had to switch to consent mode, and the promise of consent mode is, of course, really positive, because there will be some modeling that will result in better measurement than with no consent mode. But there are many disadvantages as well. Mainly that there's a high threshold, so you need 700 ad clicks per day for 7 days to measure, to have the conversion modeling in place. And that can be a high threshold for many organizations. Also, this is only for Google, but also companies that are, for example, doing Pinterest or Facebook, consent mode doesn't work that way. So the modeling will not take place. So this is, for example, a situation that one of our clients had. What you see here is the difference in data tracking, where the blue line is the client-side line, and the orange line is the server-side line, and you see the data difference in a period. Where you see here is it's beginning of March. Here the difference was quite normal. And then all of a sudden, consent mode took place, and we saw very high differences in the difference between client side and server side. And when we split that out, before consent mode, the difference was around 11%, which is ad blocking and browser blocking. And after, it was around 60%. And that's ad blocking, browser blocking, and consent mode. So the effect of consent mode was around 50% on the data that was really the case or was measured. Now in the server container, there are a few tags, the Google tags, that comply automatically with consent mode, and for example, Facebook, Pinterest, Snapchat, they're not automatically compliant with consent mode. So that means that the server container still automatically still sends all the data through when it's not a Google tag. So if you set up consent mode in the web container the right way, using server-side tagging, GA4, Google Ads, the remarketing tags, they will automatically comply with what's happening in the web container. But all the other tags are not. So that's why you can measure the differences here. So if your company is big enough, then consent mode will restore some of this data. If it's not big enough, then that's a lot of data loss that you have. Of course, since we're taggers, we say that the future is server side. The main reasons for that is that that you can measure more data. for example, the ad blockers and the browser blocking. You can measure more conversions, especially in the social channels, but also in Google Ads. We see a big uplift in measured conversions. The GDPR is also an important factor, because you can, with TAGGRS, you can collect the data in your own country. There are countries in the world where it's really strict. This is a really a benefit for companies that are strict with GDPR. You can collect it in your own country and are not dependent on America, for example. It will increase the speed of the website. It gives you more control, because with server-side tracking you have all the data visible, so you can really see what data is exactly being sent. And with third-party tracking, Google or Facebook determines themselves what data is being sent, and now you're back in control, and you can decide whether you want to send, for example, IP addresses or not. So it gives you more control, and it gives you a higher data quality, because you can enrich the data that you send to Google Ads or to Facebook, because you have the freedom to send additional data to the server container, as I said, for example, with profit tracking, but that could also be personal data on your customers to allow for better enhanced tracking, enhanced conversions, for example.
And it also works the other way, right? You can also prevent certain data from being sent. If you want to exclude, for example, personal data, that might also be interesting if you're really, really privacy focused.
Yeah, true. Yeah, so it gives you the layer of control to determine yourself what data you want to send. And when you look at the online marketing perspective, usually the more data, the better the campaign. But if you look from a privacy perspective, and that could work hand in hand with online marketing, of course, because there are many privacy strict companies that are doing campaigns, online marketing campaigns as well. You can also minimize the flow of personal data, and that you have the full control over that. So then the question is, what can you do per type of blocking to maximize your tracking and conversions? For ad blockers, moving to server-side tracking and using enhanced tracking script is by far the best and easiest to set up that's currently active. You could also use webhooks, which I will explain a bit later. For browser blocking, the same thing with server-side tracking and webhooks, but you could also add CDN, which I will discuss. You can do cookie recovery, which replaces lost cookies, which is automatically handled by our tracking script. And there's also the enhanced conversions part. That's actually Google's main focus right now to measure as much conversions as possible in a changing dynamic with the depreciation of third-party cookies. So enhanced conversion is always good to set up, but I think that's covered in the courses as well. And the last one is consent mode, what you can do to maximize that. The biggest one I didn't even list is to optimize your cookie banner. This always has the highest effect on consent mode, but the other side is, of course, that to set it up well and to use enhanced conversions. So these are the main things you can do. When we zoom in on ad blocking, for example, as I said, moving to server-side tracking allows you to use a different tracking script, which is the enhanced tracking script. Normally, when you set up GTM, you get a script from Google and you place that in the head and body of your website. With server-side tracking, you can use a different script. which sends the data to, for example, this is the script which sends the data to the subdomain of your company, and this will trigger less ad blockers to block that data. There are ad blockers that notice and move further. That's why we're also developing this script and the technology behind it. We're develop this further. So the second step that we are implementing is that it masks the requests. It's a bit technical, but yeah, we anonymize this GTM.js part in a way that ad blockers would not recognize this part, and so it will be masked and not triggered by ad blockers. And in the third step, we will even go further and dynamically mask it, so the code will be always different. All in order to have the best effect on ad blocking. So this is the first step. Another step that you can take if the event is really important to you is to use webhooks. We have a tool in TAGGRS where you can generate a webhook. This webhook will send the data not through a data layer to Google Tag Manager, because the data layer moves through the browser, and that can be blocked by browsers and ad blocking. But the webhook sends the data directly to the server container, which you see here. So this is like the for an example of how this works. So if you send a webhook from the backend of your website to the server container, you can then send it to any platform you want. This way, it cannot be blocked by ad blockers or browser blocking, and this will have a positive effect on measurability. The downside of it is that it does not automatically comply with consent mode, since it's sent directly from the website to the server container, and it doesn't move to the consent mode in the web container. So what you will see in practice, if you do this, it will always send the data, and but it's not consented data. So if you're strict on the privacy, or strict if you want to comply with regulations, then you cannot use it in that way.
Can I ask you two quick questions about that, Niels?
Yeah.
So I think this is really, really interesting for a lot of us. So is there a way that you can make this comply to, for example, GDPR AVG by somehow incorporating consent modes with it? So are you looking for a way to make sure that it's looking at the consent checks given by the user, or isn't it possible to do that?
It is possible. We're in conversations with some of the biggest cookie banner companies to figure out ways to also make the server container compliant with consent mode automatically, because that's a big downside at this point, because the server container does not automatically comply as the web container does. So we're looking into these aspects as well. The hard thing for us, let me rephrase it. It is possible to do it, but it's a bit technical, and it should be included with a development part. So it's not. It's really advanced to make it work.
So it's not really easy to toggle an on and off switch and have it checked for consent mode checks, for example. It's really technical, and you need some developer knowledge in order to do that.
Yeah, so you need to store the consent data in the browser and send it along with the webhook to do so, which requires development knowledge on how to do it. And for us, the future, we are focused on solving the consent mode in the server container first, and then see if we can also incorporate the webhook part of it.
Okay. And if this webhook fires, does it send the data automatically to the server container instead of GTM, or does it talk with the platforms directly, like Google Ads and Meta Ads and stuff like that?
Could also be really dependent on how you want to use it, but most software have the API possibility. So yeah, you can also send it directly.
Okay, cool. So if you want to set this up, right now it's not really compliant with consent mode and GDPR AVG. But if you want to maximize conversion volumes, this might be a really interesting feature to dive into, right?
Yeah. So we for example, we have a test mode on in TAGGRS. It's the consent mode blocker. Because when you move to server-side tagging, often you have the consent mode interfering with the data, and when you want to set it up, you want to test if every part of the data moves through. And if you use the consent mode blocker, it will also send all the it will replace the automatic mode of the Google software. So if it's really about measuring everything, then this mode can be used. But I would not advise to go around AVG and GDPR in that way, because I think it's a new reality that we have to adjust to. But from a marketing perspective, I can always understand the need to maximize all the data. But if it's not consented, it's really questionable if you want to use the data. But yeah, that's all. We see different perspectives on that. But from my advice, it would always be to, for example, with webhooks, to make it work with consent, and then especially for example for retargeting and those parts, because that's really visible for the visitor as well. If you did it consent and you get retargeted, then that's not really a positive experience. So yeah, you can base it on your own IDs on that. Next part. We discussed webhooks, enhanced tracking script. Then you also have the CDN. And CDN is a content delivery network, and it will serve, it's mostly used for websites to serve the content faster, because it loads on the nearest server. So that's where it might be familiar. But it also has another benefit, and that is that the IP address of the tracking will be the same as the IP address of the website. And that's one thing that Safari did to get server-side tracking under control, because Safari reasons that that server-side tracking cannot be used to avoid browser blocking. So they had an additional rule to say if the server-side tracking is not on the same IP address as the website, or at least for 50% the same, then it will still browser block some requests that are being sent. So we did a case study on that. We saw one client of us had around 31% Safari users, and their difference before CDN was around 7%, and that difference obviously comes from ad blocking and browser blocking. But after the CDN, so then the IP addresses were the same. We saw that the difference climbed up to around 11%. So that's a 4% increase in measured data, and also conversions probably. This is measured, by the way, on page views, so it's not on purchase. But yeah, often we see similar effects on events. So yeah, it could be if your website has a lot of Safari users, adding a CDN to your tracking can really improve measurability as well. So it's a great test to set up. It's not hard to set up. On our website, we have a blog on, if you search for CDN, we have a blog on how you can set it up. And yeah, if you're a bit technical, it's easy to do. Well, then because I also said enhanced conversions, but I think that is being covered in the other courses as well. So I will not dive into that deeply, but yeah, that's another part which has a positive effect on conversion measurement. So don't forget it. But yeah, I will focus on the server side part of it. When you want to move from client side to server side tracking, as I said, it can be, especially when you do it the first time, it can be a bit overwhelming in terms of where do you start and where do I need to look for. So this is something we as a company try to make better every time we do updates. That eventually we want to be able to almost do an automatic setup, but we find that every company has different needs and different events. So if you want to make server-side tracking work in all situations, it's really hard to automate all tags. But we came a lot further in the past year. So where we are at right now is that we have a template gallery, and the template gallery has different setups. For example, a basic setup, but also more advanced setups. We base that on the CMS that's being used. So it could be Lightspeed, it could be Magento, Shopify. Yeah, they're geared towards the data layers that are being used in these CMS. So you can download a template that fits your needs most accurately. When you do this, you can get access to the live template. So you will be added in Google Tag Manager in a live environment with multiple companies that are in the live version. This is the version that we keep updated. So yeah, you always have access to the latest versions. But we also have an offline JSON file, and in that file you can download the offline setup, and you can import it in your own Google Tag Manager environment. This offline version is periodically updated, so it's not always the latest compared to live, but it is anonymous. So some companies choose for the offline version in that way. Yeah, and if you get access, you will see something like this. So this is, I think this is a basic setup with a few tags in it. So you have Facebook, you have Snapchat, Pinterest, Google Ads, GA4. So it's the basic version of it where you can measure purchases as events and send it to Google Ads or whatever. It also is compliant with consent mode. We've manually added it to the server container as well for the most important tags such as Facebook and Snapchat. As I said, Google is doing it automatically, so no need to switch that to manually do it. So in this setup, the consent mode is being installed as well. We do that with Cookiebot. So if you do not run Cookiebot, then you can pause the tags and add your own system for that. But yeah, that's always easier than to build it up from scratch. So if you use this setup, you'll come a long way, and you just have to tweak it to your own situation. Some companies want to have more control and do their own setup. We have in our software, we have under implementation, we have all the major software that you can run server side. We have explanations, so manuals and videos on how to set it up. Most companies that start with a big web container and want to move to server side from their existing web container, it's sometimes better to do it step by step and manually, because you have more control and you have already built a lot of the tracking structure. So it's better to do it tag by tag. So they can use this part. And if you're a website that has no active tracking, or you start over, then it's better to use the template and start from there. Then in the software we have all the analytics on how your container is, your server container is behaving. So that can be used to check whether the data is moving through in the right way. If the server container, if server side is below client side, then there could be a range of issues that cause this negative difference. Or if it's a really high difference, it can be there can be different situations. For those situations, we have a debugging a debug series is what we call it. And in the debug series, you have all the different situations that you can encounter with possible solutions and causes for these issues. So we try to make it easy to set up, easy to monitor, and easy to solve. And if that's not working and you cannot find the issue, then we also have a support platform where you can chat or send in a ticket to our support team. So we try to help you to get set up the right way. So that's my presentation. Hopefully I could explain it really well, and I'm sure there will be questions. So take it away, Bob.
Thank you very much, Niels. So I think that is Nick, right? Is it Nick on the photo?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Nick helped me out several times through the chat already. So really glad he's on the other side of the computer. Thank you, Niels, for the extensive presentation. The roadmap really got me excited, especially the part about blocking ad blockers and script blockers. It's always fun that we as marketers are trying to block the things that are trying to block our things.
Yeah.
It's like an endless game. But really nice roadmap. So I have some questions myself, but before I dive into my own questions, we have two questions from the chat already. One from Sharif, where you mentioned how the webhook essentially worked. Sharif is asking, with the webhook, can we send FBC, FBP, the Google Click ID to the server Google Tag Manager container as well? Would that work?
It's a bit of the same issue as sending consented data. It is stored in a cookie, FBC and FVP. So if you can access the cookie data and send it with the webhook, it could work. Yeah.
Yeah, but you would need consent theoretically, right? Yeah. So you could. Yeah. Okay. And then another question from Clint. With the increased ability to collect data, what does server-side tagging do to address web bot traffic? And how does it identify or filter it, if it does? How do we know that the data is clean?
Yeah, you can. We have in the enrichment part of the taggers, we have a function that can recognize bot traffic. So yeah, it's possible to recognize that. We have not really focused on clearing bot traffic from our system perspective. So we know that there are lists of active bots, and we could incorporate that as a filter in TAGGRS. So we could say, for example, we filter out all known bots, but it hasn't been a priority so far because we're really mostly focused on the stuff that I spoke about. So it is possible, but it hasn't been our top priority yet.
Yeah, so maybe in the meantime, it would be better or wiser to use a click fraud tool like Lunio or ClickSeize for that part, right? Yeah. Okay, cool. But yeah, never say never. So maybe it will come in the future when all of
it's a great great question. Got me thinking as well. So maybe it's something we should internally discuss.
Yeah. Nice point for the roadmap or the backlog of the roadmap. So I've got a couple of questions as well. Guys, if you have any more questions, feel free to drop them inside of the chat so we can address them. So the first question is a general question because I'm just really curious. So what's your highest uplift you've seen after implementing server-side tagging yourself?
I've seen really high differences around. We've seen around 100% difference, but that's usually the case that something is misconfigured in the first place. So what you often see is that companies are, especially that are older companies, they have had multiple agencies, and they all push their own tracking setup. So they use when we went from UA to GA4 and use all the G tags. That's where really the problems for most companies started, because they have the G tag is a bit more advanced in the sense that it could block data from other G tags, and that's when we saw that when companies have tracking scripts in the code and in GTM themselves, and also maybe in a plugin. When things really get messy and you set up server-side tracking in the messy structure that you already have, then sometimes the differences are either really high or either really negative. So the difference that we've seen do not always reflect what's being real, but we've seen really high differences that are just being caused by poor setups. And if we look at like regular setups, it's around 30% what's on the high side.
Yeah, that's really high already. So I think I just checked through all of my containers. I think last month the highest that I had in a sense of data improvement was 26%. Yeah, and I think that's already really high. Yeah, I think on average this was more towards 15%, right, in the last few months.
Yeah, that's really a good average, because it really depends on your users. If you have really privacy focused users of the website, they might have more ad blockers, use Safari or other browsers, then the difference is higher. If you take in consent mode in consideration and use the server container not compliant with consent mode, then you see really high differences. But if you take consent mode in the right way, then around 30% is really a high difference.
Yeah, and that's going to do a lot with your conversion volumes inside of Google Ads if you do it right. Yeah. Okay, cool. So you mentioned one of the ways to maximize your data inside of your server container as well is by optimizing your cookie banner design. So I'm really curious. Have you been experimenting with your own cookie banner designs lately? And if so, what cookie banner design worked best for you or your clients? Do you have any info about that?
Yeah, we've personally with TAGGRS ourselves, we've not been really focused on optimizing the cookie banner. it's good. We should, but we haven't done it because we were really focused on clients first. And what we see with clients is when you create a cookie banner that you have to accept or deny on the first page, it really works better. So if it's a bit more in your face, then people will accept it sooner. And also because if you use more pages and do not comply or deny the cookie banner, if it's still there on the bottom of the page, then the first pages that you use are not being counted as consented page views. So the best tip would be to make it in a way that you have to accept or deny it in the first moment you use the website. That's really important one. The other tips are strictly not in line with regulations, but if you can make accept more appealing as a button than deny, that will work. If you make it harder to deny, so for example, if you say manage options instead of deny all, that takes more effort for the user. So most users, then say accept and move on. These are things that work really well, but strictly with the new regulations, they say you have to make every button the same styling. So yeah, it's not really
And on the same level, on the first level. Yeah, so it's like gray hat area, or I think it's even black hat area to begin with, because it's against the law. But if you can find any pieces or any ways to work your way around the regulation, or if you're like, okay, I'm just going to do this anyway, then you could consider utilizing a tactic like that. Yeah,
that's
in
really,
fact, it's against the law.
So that's really the hard thing about the whole privacy discussion, is that the privacy regulation is really focused on Google, Facebook, to make them compliant, and we as regular companies have to abide by these rules. But there's no active regulators to companies. So we see really differences in how company approach it. Some companies say I have to when they come to regulate me, but till that point I'm just going to do whatever to maximize my data. And others say we want to comply and we do exactly following the rules. And that should be the in my opinion, the go-to solution.
Okay, so we've got 2 additional questions from the chat. Another one from Clint. I'm very interested in using TAGGRS. What's the onboarding process like from my perspective, and what would my clients experience? So could you tell a bit more about your onboarding process if you were going to use TAGGRS?
Most agencies plan first plan a demo conversation just to get some feeling about the company. Then you can set up a free account, so you can start experience the software. If you want to use it as an agency, you can also become a reseller in our system. And if you're a reseller, you can invite clients and connect the payment through your client, so you won't have to pay for your client, but let the client pay, and then you manage the containers. So that's always a part that agencies usually like. And also we have a kickback system in place. When you have more than 3 companies on our system, then you can also generate a kickback fee on your customers. So that's interesting. And we have some additional benefits, such as premium support and badges that you can place on your website, showing that you're active in server-side tracking. The onboarding flow, when you become a reseller, this is something you have to tell us that you want to become a reseller. It's not automatic in the system. But when we switch you to reseller mode, you can add your clients, which is really really an easy step to do. It will guide you through it. if you cannot find a way to do it, you can always ask for a demo and we'll explain it, or follow all the guides that we have in the software.
And the guides are really extensive and good. So you've done a great job creating all of the guides. So I think if you are somewhat technical, you should be able to set up all of the Tagger containers yourself. So another question from Domas. How can regulators see or check if server-side tagging is implemented and unconsented data is being shared with Google Ads? So is there a way for you to just share the data anyway with Google Ads without the regulators knowing you're essentially doing that?
There is. Yeah, so this is the black box thing about server-side tracking, and that's like the famous quote: everything that happens in the server container stays in the server container. Or the one I heard recently, the joke was always, if you want to bury a person, you should do it on the second page of Google. And now it's if you want to bury a person, you can do it in the server container, because everything that happens is
That's a good one.
yeah, everything that happens is anonymous in that sense. So it's server to server, so no one can access that. You see, for example, Facebook is making no rush to put consent on the server container on their tags, because this allows them to still measure all the data that's happening. So you see Google really following up on the consent side, and you see all the social media channels really letting it they're not moving really fast to put consent on the tags. So yeah, you can, in the server container, you have all the space to do what you want, and it's basically your own principles that you follow what you want to do with the data.
So do with that information what you will, Thomas. So I've got some small questions to end with. So I'm quite interested in the whole CDN approach. So TAGGRS has CDN compatibility, but why would you consider using one? And when does it become interesting to consider utilizing a CDN? And if you want to use a CDN, what kind of CDN supplier would you go with?
Yeah, a great question. The main reason why you want to use it is if you have a lot of Safari users on your website. A lot is more than 20%. In our data, we see around 60% is Chrome users, and yeah, the rest is divided over all different browsers. But if you have high amount of Safari users, CDN will really have an increase in measurability. So that's a good step. Then how to set it up? We use Cloudflare because it's like the go-to solution most companies use. I can quickly find a link on how you set it up, because we have a guide on how you can do it.
Is it expensive to run Cloudflare?
No, I think it's actually for free, but don't hold me to it. But I'll search for the link. Let me see if I can get the English one. Here it is. So I'll post it in the chat. So this is the link on how to set up the CDN. It's not really hard to set up. You have to have access to the web hosting. It should be easy to set up if you're somewhat technical. What might be interesting if you want to run your own experiment is that you first see how much data differences are now in TAGGRS, and then add the CDN, and then see if the differences increased or hopefully not decreased.
Does it impact other regions of the business besides the website? or is it like somewhat risk-free to configure this?
That's something that I should ask developers, because I'm not sure on. I think it's really risk-free because it doesn't impact. It only impacts the page speed in a positive way. But I'm not like deep expert on CDN, so I can ask our developers on that side. But it's a small step, so the way we run the experiment, we didn't saw any downside of it.
Cool. Interesting. I'm going to put some hours in that to see if I can make it work for my clients and if it makes sense to use it. I think it would be a great addition. So last question, if I may. So what TAGGRS add-ons would you really suggest using? Because you have like the data enricher, for example. Are there other add-ons you really suggest using for us as customers?
Yeah, so first of all, the enhanced tracking script, that's the main one that you should use. Then I would, in the test phase, I would use the consent mode blocker, because you really want to be sure that you've set up the right way from client to server-side tracking. It's especially with consent. If you're not set up the right way, consent mode, if it's active, it will mask a lot of the things that are really happening. So if you, for example, use the consent mode block for a week, then you have all the data at your disposal, and you can really see if it's a positive effect. And after that, you can switch back to consent mode, and then you know you at least you're set up the right way. So that's something I would do. The data enricher, it's really important for companies that are really extensive with their data analysis. It's not for common use cases. You don't need the data enricher per se. It's only if you want to use the data for some additional tracking. So that's not something I would first recommend. Multi-domain can be one if you have multiple web shops, so you want to do first-party data cookies on every web shop, then multi-domain is a good one. And yeah, those are the main important ones.
Cool. So those were the questions. I have no questions remaining inside of the chat, so that means we can end the session. So thank you, Niels, for giving this presentation and giving all of the insights what you're working on the upcoming months. I think the roadmap is really exciting. I'm really excited for the data layer plugins as well, because that means, especially if you push it for Shopify, that a lot of plugins and apps will become, not needed anymore. So that's really interesting. So yeah, good job on doing what you do. And I hope that some of us that are not using TAGGRS are going to give it a try, because I think it's a great tool and it gives you a lot more data, plus 20% on average, like what we discussed. So give it a try. Is there anything you would end with? Would like to end with, Niels?
No, I'm really happy I could do this, and it's for me personally, it's also great insights. For example, with the bot traffic, yeah, it gives me new ideas as well to consider. So thanks for that as well, for thinking with us, and I hope you enjoyed it and have some new ideas on how to optimize.
I certainly did. So thank you once again, and hope to see you around.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.